This is the Final Word T20 World Cup Daily, day 22.2, the second part of this day of the Super 8s. Geoff Lemon and Bharat Sundaresan. I'm in St Lucia. You, however, are in St Vincent. Bharat, the show's brought to you by Westfield London, Westfield Stratford City. Australia played Afghanistan tonight. Please tell me about it in 30 seconds or less.
History was made when Afghanistan finally got over the line against Australia. There was a period where they thought Maxwell's going to do it again, but they got rid of him. They got rid of everyone. They were the best team on the night. They set up a great platform. Their openers were brilliant. They had a big partnership. They lost their way in the middle, but made up for it. Once they got over 145, it was always going to be a challenge. That Naveen-ul-Haq was sensational again, got 2 wickets. But once they got rid of Maxwell, there was only one way it was going. And the moment Adam Zampa got out, there was a real earthquake. The ground actually shook. The press box shook. We were asked to stay away from the windows because they said, Bill, this thing might just collapse. 6.2 on the Richter scale, but I think Afghanistan win against Australia much, much higher than that on any Richter scale you want to call.
Unbelievable. What a result. What a remarkable night to have been there, to have seen that happen. I mean, they should have done it in the 50 over Cup last year, 7 for 91 at that point. They managed to not just choke, but choke deluxe, gave up potentially the best one-day innings ever played. And tonight it could have been the same. There's a point where even when Maxwell's batting with Matthew Wade for a minute, it just felt like, well, these two, they're old Victorian teammates. They've batted together for 15 years at a high level. They know each other so well. To me, it just seemed like, well, they'll be able to figure out a way to do this. It was challenging, but they needed sort of 8, 9 and over, not kind of 10, 12, 13 and over. It seemed relatively in hand, and Maxwell was playing so well, just a level above everybody else on the night. Aggressive, manufacturing ways to score, taking on spin and pace, using that ridiculous wrist whip to pick the ball up from outside off stump and hit it over the leg side. Straight sixes down the ground, rifling them through cover. He just looks so good. And then on 59, he plays that shot behind point. He gets caught. Really good catch. Diving forward inside the circle by Noor Ahmad, whose fielding didn't necessarily stay at that standard later, but he took that catch. And suddenly it was sliding the other way. But it started with everything going right for Afghanistan. We've talked about them a bit during this series as a team who've got some really good parts of their side. They've got a good opening batting pair, a good opening bowling pair, and their spinners, not so much the middle order batting. And so if those things fire, then they can beat good teams. Well, they fired tonight. The opening partnership was there with the bat. Naveen was there bowling beautifully off the top with the ball and taking wickets early up, bowling Travis Head with a really good one to start things off. So those parts came together on a surface where it tends to favour spin and it tends to favour batting first and defending. And Australia go with the extra spinner with Agar. So, sort of walk us through it maybe from the start of the game there with how things were set up, with Marsh deciding to chase at the toss and what people were making of the conditions locally.
No, I think in terms of the conditions, we knew what we had to expect, and George Bailey spoke to the Australian media to us, I think the day before they played the Super 8s game against Scotland, in fact on the day, that afternoon, and they spoke about how they'd seen a couple of games play out in St Vincent, and they were already planning for this game. By then it was pretty clear that Afghanistan would be the opponent, and they said we will use the second spinner or the third spinner if you add Maxwell to the mix, and that's why they played Ashton Agar against Scotland, not because it had anything to do with England, and we expected him to play. I personally was very surprised that the fast bowler who missed out was Mitchell Starc. I know Pat Cummins took the hat-trick. I know Josh Hazlewood has been brilliant. But when you have Cummins, Hazlewood, Stoinis as your three main seamers, even though they're all world-class, Cummins and Hazlewood in particular, there is no point of difference. And I thought Mitchell Starc was missed badly by Australia today because he could have provided that point of difference. He generally does, right? Especially, you spoke about the openers, 2 right-handers. He has swung the ball a bit in this tournament, and you know how he strikes early. And if you can dismiss one of those openers or separate that opening partnership early, like the West Indies did, like India did, there's not a lot of firepower in the middle order. So I think that's where Mitchell Starc was missed significantly by Australia. Like I said, it was always going to be either him, one of the big fast bowlers were to sit out. I didn't expect it to be Starc. And I think overall Australia just had a forgettable night on the field. Like we saw them struggle against Scotland with 7 catches, so 7 dropped catches or 6. Today, all of them were difficult chances, except maybe the David Warner catch when he runs it. Because it's David Warner, he makes those catches look easy. But by then, I don't think that made too much of a difference. But all the half chances, Geoff, it just felt like it wasn't going to be Australia's night. The Adam Zampa attempt on the boundary, a couple of misfields from Ashton Agar, both of which, it's not that he let the ball through his legs, right? Like the ball just landed and turned away from him. The Marcus Stoinis return catch, the Travis Head catch where he tried running in and taking catch. All these things just weren't going Australia's way. And also the number of direct hits that they could have pulled off and didn't. So it was a forgettable day on the field. The bowling was okay, but yeah, I think, look, we will talk about the historic moment that is Afghanistan beating Australia. I wouldn't even say finally, they haven't played them that often. If you look at the last 2 games they played in Adelaide and the T20 World Cup, the only other T20I, they pushed Australia, and it was Australia playing for run rate, but they nearly got there with Rashid in the end. And we know what happened in Mumbai. So, that they've not played too much cricket. And the last other two games are the 2015 and 2019 50-over World Cup. So, it's coming probably the 5th or 6th game against Australia. But I think they outplayed Australia in many ways, tactically, strategically, and with barrel ball.
It's interesting that when a few catches went down against Scotland, people were accusing Australia of throwing the match, which was not the case tonight because they really, really wanted to win tonight. The historical aspect, maybe we'll come to that in a second. The where it leaves this group. I mean, Australia are not knocked out, but they could be knocked out. Basically, Australia have to beat India now because Afghanistan will play Bangladesh. Afghanistan have to beat Bangladesh, and then they might be able to qualify. So the way things are at the moment is Australia are ahead on net run rate by a bit, but not by a vast amount of Afghanistan. So if both the teams won, then it would depend on the size of the wins. Afghanistan could overtake Australia with a thumping win if Australia had a close win. Equally, both teams could lose So Australia could lose to India and still qualify if Bangladesh beat Afghanistan, as long as Bangladesh don't get enough of a net run rate boost to potentially qualify themselves, which, they're a smoky. It's not completely impossible that could happen. It's pretty unlikely, but net run rate can swing a long way. So basically for Australia, the simplest thing to do is beat India. But if they don't beat India, they're not necessarily out. If they lost to India narrowly and Afghanistan lost to Bangladesh, by enough, then or any sort of loss, then Australia would be okay. It's interesting. It's poised, as they say. But sort of putting all that aside, so basically Afghanistan have to back it up and beat Bangladesh and make sure they win another game in the Super 8s and make sure that they go through that way. Although they could go through if they lost really narrowly and Australia got thumped. They could also maybe go through on net run rate there. Who knows? All these permutations, but it's sort of more important than that in a way is just appreciating the result for what it is, which is a team that's been growing up in front of us over the last few years. You look back through the history of matches that they've played. They started beating Zimbabwe years ago, and then beating Ireland, and then they started beating West Indies when West Indies were at a particularly low ebb. And they've beaten those sorts of teams quite a lot of times. Then they beat Sri Lanka and quite a few times too. They beat Pakistan a couple of times. Some of this is in 20-over cricket. Some of this is in 50-over cricket. They've beaten Ireland in a Test match as well. And then they start moving their way up through the ranks. So they're beating Pakistan. Then at this World Cup they beat England at the previous World Cup, New Zealand and Australia at this World Cup. So they've beaten all of the Test teams now except South Africa and India. And who knows, maybe they just do South Africa in the semi and India in the final and they're done. But it's been an extraordinary thing that this side is not just competitive, but can actually beat the top teams now, where I was starting to think they might be running out of steam given the way they played against India. They looked pretty flat, but that wasn't the case.
that wasn't the case, and they were up for it from the beginning. There's just something about Rahmanullah Gurbaz, Naveenul Haq, and Azmatullah, these guys, right? Like, I mean, we got so used to an Afghanistan team which had some old school characters in it. I mean, look, we will come to the old school guy who won it for them today with the ball. I'm surprised Steve spent like 10 minutes and we've not mentioned Gulbadin Naib and the guns, and the fact that it was he was player of the match, and it was his 4-wicket burst across 4 overs. I mean, when you think of the fact that it dismissed Stoinis, David, Glenn Maxwell when it looked like he was about to take the game away, and Pat Cummins, and took a great catch of Ashton Agar. He was a star, but I think I was there for the West Indies Afghanistan game, dead rubber, and they looked a little defeated after that, even though it was a dead rubber, because it was a proper pounding. And against India, like with Bangladesh, Afghanistan have always had that edge. They've come close, they came close, very close to beating them in a bilateral, but doing it in a World Cup, you just knew they were going to struggle.
2019 they were close too.
2019 they were close. I mean, they could have well won it, And you know, these conditions with St Vincent, and there was a reason why Australia were concerned about coming here and playing Afghanistan. It wasn't just about the pitch or the conditions. It was literally about playing Afghanistan and their bowling attack on this pitch. I mean, funnily enough, it wasn't the spinners who beat Australia. In the end, it was Gulbadin Naib and Naveenul Haq with the ball. But I think they just the way they batted, I thought it was very clever. They didn't try anything funky at the top. I think they were going at just over 6 in over for the first 7-8 overs. They gave themselves the platform. They ran incredibly well, and Rashid Khan just spoke about it at the press conference. He said that was the one thing he was most impressed with, like how well they ran. And I was really happy to see Gurbaz not take it from Marcus Stoinis, give it back. Yes, I know Marcus Stoinis had the last laugh while he was bowling, but it was only after Gurbaz had hit him for a 6 after they'd had that exchange with each other. I was worried that they were losing their way in the end after the openers were dismissed. But crucial for them that they got runs towards the end. I think Karim Jannat played well. Nabi pulled off a couple of boundaries, and they got to 145. You were like, they're really in this game. All they need to do, I kept saying, was get rid of Travis Head early, because he's been breaking matches from the top. And Naveenul Haq, like he did in that famous game at Wankhede, gave them a blistering start with the ball. And then, it was just the Maxwell show before there was no show, and it was all about Afghanistan for them.
Yeah. So Gurbaz and Ibrahim Zadran put on 118. That's their 3rd century partnership. No one else has done that, no other pair. And interesting that Afghanistan changed that around. After they changed the opening partnership in the previous game against India, they brought Hajratul Azazai back to try to slog it at the top, and that didn't work. So they went back to what has been working. Ibrahim's always the slower among them. He went basically to run a ball today, 51 off 48. Gurbaz a bit faster, 60 off 49. And I was watching that partnership thinking they're just leaving it, they're going a little too slowly here. They were sort of ticking along at 7 and over, and I thought that maybe that was a tactical misstep, but they had the confidence that they were building a score. It was well managed. It was punctuated with enough aggression here and there, but they were picking the balls to hit. So there's the occasional 6, like the one that Gurbaz muscles away off Stoinis, that pull shot. He's carving over the offside here and there, but a lot of the time, in between times, they're just collecting runs and like you say, getting up and down as quickly as possible. And like you, I thought they might have botched it towards the end of that innings, because once that partnership's broken, wickets fall quickly. Azmatullah's out for 2. Rashid Khan comes up to try to pinch hit. That doesn't work. He's out for 2. Gulbadin's out first ball. So, Nabi whacks 10 off a couple of deliveries, and Karim Jannat makes 13. But it felt like they were maybe 15, 20 short of where they could have been, or probably should have been with that start. Cummins takes another hat-trick, which becomes almost a footnote. Hat-tricks in consecutive T20 internationals, pretty unusual. And should have had 4 and 4. David Warner drops the catch, which I don't think there's ever been a double hat-trick dropped, as far as I can tell. There haven't been many. In T20 internationals, I reckon there have been 4 of them that I can remember, and one. I reckon Malinga got that one in 50 over cricket, and that's the only one. With Andrew Hall and whatnot, that South Africa game that he nearly wins out of nowhere. But I don't know if we know players have had the hat trick dropped, but I don't know if anyone's had the double dropped. But Warner running in, slid in and put that one down. So 148. seemed like it could have been short, but in the end it was more than enough. 127 is what Australia's all out for. Maxwell with 59 of those. So get this, Glenn Maxwell in his last 2 hits against Afghanistan, 260 runs from 169 balls, out once, so obviously averaging 260. The rest of his team, everyone who's batted in those 2 games, 129 runs between them for 16 wickets at an average of 8. So nobody else has been able to make a run. The next highest score today was 12. Marsh makes 12, Stoinis makes 11, everyone else single figures. They were abject, really, batting-wise, but it starts with Naveen, full, fast swinging, bowls Travis Head. Mitch Marsh, he's quite aggressive, hits a couple of good drives, and then hits one up in the air off Naveen. And then it's Warner getting out off Nubby. That feels like a key moment there where he tries that slog sweep behind square and toes one up in the air. And then the pressure's on, but it's Maxwell and Stoinis together, and you're thinking that they might have this covered, and then in comes Gulbadin and just starts chiselling them out with some smart medium pace. He used the bouncer well. He got alarming lift. Everyone got alarming lift at times. Adam Zampa got a wicket with a bouncer, basically. It was almost collarbone height from a leg spinner when he had one being hit up in the air late in that Afghanistan innings. So that was Ibrahim Zadran with these, so attempting to pull a ball that suddenly got up around throat height from the leggy. So it was a weird old day, but Gulbadin used the surface well, and like you say, took those. No, it didn't just take the wickets, but takes that great catch at cover to get rid of Agar, who's the player who can maybe get them over the line when they need about 30 or 40 from the last. Yeah. Was it 40 from the last 3 overs? 36 from the last 3 overs.
36, yeah. And I think, again, I just full credit to Afghanistan. The wicket of Mitchell Marsh, for example, just before that delivery, Naveen Haq and Rashid Khan came together, had a chat. They had a short fine leg, as most bowlers do, and the deep backward square leg was quite square. And they pulled the fielder out. So he's bowling with no fine leg. And it's not that the deep backward square leg was turned, pushed further to be really fine. So he's bowling with no fine leg. Bowls the off cutter, which is a brave ball. Mitchell Marsh, who just started feeling getting some rhythm, swings at it, hits it up in the air, and it's scored. The ball to Travis Head is a perfect setup. Perfect ball to Travis Head early on. Attack his stumps. Teams have started doing that a lot in T20 cricket. He points at Rashid Khan look, I told you I had planned this wicket. And they used 8 bowlers in their first 11 overs. So I've rarely seen a captain be so proactive as Rashid Khan was today on the field. Literally, the field was being changed every 2 balls, 1 ball. The slip out, gully in, short cover, short mid-wicket. It was just sensational watching how they went about their cricket. Like I said, we will talk about the historic nature of the win, but it was how well they played in a cricketing sense. And we saw them do that against New Zealand as well. They're a very difficult team to chase against, especially in conditions like these. So it was I won't call it a gamble, but it was a risk that Australia took, trying to chase against them. Maybe the belief was we won't let them make over 140, and I think that's what Mitchell Marsh touched upon as well. So, and look, it was all about spin. The hype around this game was, oh my God, they have to face Rashid Khan and Noor Ahmed, and they even brought in the young spinner who had not played a single game, who was a late fly-in for the IPL as well. So who got the ball only 1 over, unfortunately for him. And there's Nabi, and the guy who turns the game around is Knight. You're right, he gets Stoinis out with the slightly short ball. And what about Gurbaz's celebration? I think I'll leave it for the Hall of Fame, the Gurbaz-Stoinis exchange. And then he gets Tim David with a ball that skids through and hits him on the pad. David is not happy with the LBW decision, but it is umpire's call, he's given out. And then, Maxwell, white ball. And in a way, I felt good for Noor Ahmed. If you think back, it was of his bowling that Mujib dropped the simplest of catches at short fine leg, and then ended up, opening the game up to Maxwell. So they were just fine. They outfielded Australia, they outbatted Australia, and they definitely outbowled Australia. Except for Noor Ahmed towards the end, who missed 2 run-out chances when all he had to do was throw the ball to a fielder by the stumps, and instead, I think the first time he managed to not pick it up, and the second time he pinged at the stumps instead of throwing it to the keeper. So he was having a bit of a mare, and had they got over the line, there's a moment when there's a no ball at the end of the 19th over, and there's a free hit, and Hazelwood's facing it, and they needed 24 at that point, and you're like, well,
Hazelwood can hit a 6. If he got onto one and it was 18 off the last, you wouldn't have entirely ruled it out. But by that point, it was Zampa and Hazelwood batting together, so that was pretty unlikely. And the Tim David LBW, I thought live that looks not out to me, given the angle in and the sort of violence of the angle in, but it was just shaving the outside of leg stump. So the umpire gets away with that one there. 127 by the time they're all out. 3 for 20 for Naveen, 4 for 20 for Gulbadin. And, Karote, the off-spinner, who got to bowl 1 over and went for 13. But quick break. We'll be back with our wrap-up after this. It is summer in the Northern Hemisphere, and if you are in England, you might be tempted to roll out the old saying, Bharat, of ice cream, you scream, we all scream for gelato. As the weather gets hot in the north, you may be screaming for gelato, like Stanley Kowalski screaming for his wife Stella. So, but you don't need to scream for gelato. A much better way to obtain gelato is to go to Badiani, where they make it, and just ask them. You don't need to scream; just ask them nicely. Paolo Pomposi is the gelato Geppetto who makes their signature Buon Talenti and Buon Talenti pistachio, which may have you weeping on your knees in public, for you have tasted heaven itself. You can find the Badiani gelaterias all over the place. But why don't you go to the one at Westfield London? Westfield London. Buy cones, don't punch cones. That won't make much sense to you. That's a reference that I think is more for me and Adam with our cultural upbringing. But there we are. Hall of Fame. I've got to throw in the Gulbadin Naib delivery to Pat Cummins, the little cutter that sort of slips out the side of his hand. It's not quite the James Faulkner sort of leg break delivery, or the other way, because Faulkner was a left armer, but this kind of wrist spinner that he used to bowl. But it was somehow different to that. It was like it slipped out the side of the middle and index fingers and spun in the air and kept low and cut in. And Cummins is backing away, and obviously Cummins is the other part of the Maxwell Cummins thing. So they've got rid of Maxwell by this point, and they were so relieved with him on 59, but Cummins was the other bit of that nightmare they had in Mumbai, and he can hit bombs, and we've seen him do it in the IPL, and with him out there was a decent chance that Australia can whack 40 at the end and get there. And so I think castling him was the moment when Afghanistan actually believe they're going to win this game, as opposed to worrying about what might happen, and what a delivery to do it with.
Oh, excellent delivery. And I think he bowled a very similar delivery, the previous delivery to Pat Cummins, which ended up in a bad review. And speaking of bad reviews, I have to talk about Gurbaz and Stoinis. It was so much fun. It starts with Marcus Stoinis trying to run into ball, and Gurbaz stops him. Marcus Stoinis was like, "What are you doing?" And then he bowls the ball, and then he says something to Gurbaz, and Gurbaz kind of asks him to go back to his mark. The next ball, Gurbaz hits him for 6, and another exchange. 2 balls later, Stoinis gets him out and does the same thing. That was the celebration, what Gurbaz had done to him. And from the moment Marcus...
ushering him away, basically.
Yeah, or sending him away. So because Gurbaz had asked him to go back to the top of the mark, this is Stoinis.
Okay, so since this is an audio medium being...
Oh, sorry, yeah.
You're flapping your hand.
I'm flapping my hand.
With the back of your hand facing me, you're flapping your hand like you're telling me to piss off.
Yes, I'm asking you to piss off, and that's what I think Stoinis was suggesting to Gurbaz. So from the moment Stoinis walks out to bat, Gurbaz is ready. As the wicketkeeper, you're in the best position. And even as he's marking, he's not even letting him mark his guard, because he's just chattering away. Eventually, the umpire had to come and stand between Gurbaz and the stumps so that Marcus Stoinis could mark his guard. And you could see they were up for it. And he was trying his level best to have a part to play in Stoinis getting out. At one point, he forces Rashid Khan to review when he should not have reviewed. The ball's pitched well outside his leg stump, with the left arm leg break bowler bowling the wrist spinner Noor Ahmed. And then there was one point where he thought there was a run out, but there wasn't. He came running in to grab the ball and throw it at the non-striker's end, because Stoinis had left his crease. He nearly tripped and fell, but that's how desperate he was. And so the moment he did take the catch, and the thing is, he took the catch on our side, the press box side, so away from the dressing room. So Stoinis gets out, he's walking away in the opposite direction. And Gurbaz, everybody's around Gurbaz celebrating him, but he wants to make his point to Stoinis. So he's left everyone behind, he's run as fast as he can. But it's too late, because Stoinis has kind of walked past, say, the 30-yard circle on the other end. So he just randomly chucks the ball up in the air, and it nearly hits the umpire at the striker's end. And it does make Stoinis at least turn around, because it was far away from Stoinis. It was closer to the umpire, but it was in his direction, and he did turn around and say a couple of things, but it was too late. So it just Gurbaz's desperation to play a role in getting rid of Stoinis and finally getting it. It was quite something to watch.
And he tried a little underarm at the stumps too when Maxwell had stepped out to try to hit the ball, and then turned around and touched his bat in, and Gurbaz throws at the stumps and then yells at Gulbadin for not backing up the throw, which he was obviously not expecting to happen. Right, I think we better call this. I know there's plenty we could talk about, but it is very late, and you need to go home, and I need to load this episode, and it is currently 20 to 2 in the morning in our part of the world. So let us be on with it. This has been the final word. T20 World Cup Daily, day 22, and the second half. The Super 8s are alive. A lot riding on the rest of the games in this group. And we will be there with you for all of it. Show's brought to you by Westfield. Thanks to Bharat Sundaresan for joining the show. Support the show on patreon.com/thefinalword. Join up. It's a good time to do it. Right, that's it. We're out. We'll see you later.